So Focus on the Five is about supporting a platform, creating a platform for 5%ers, a soft place for 5%ers to land. 5%ers is, by their nature, are risk takers, entrepreneurs. They're people that were born in their DNA to become something greater than themselves, to be a part of something greater than themselves. And they know that. They inherently know that. It's like if somebody's born tall, they know they're tall. But when you're born a 5%er, you don't always know that. It's just something that you just feel. Like you just know that God exists. Some people know God exists because someone told them God exists. But see, a 5%er just knows it. No one has to tell them that. They just know that there is a supreme being out there that exists. They could be Buddha. It's the same principle. It doesn't change. They're people of faith. It's faith-based. It has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with what they feel inside, that they know there's something of a greater power that they have to fall back on, which is what creates them to be a risk taker. That's why they're willing to be a risk taker. That's why they're willing to be the first one in line and go, I'll volunteer. I'll do it. In fact, you know what a 5%er does? They don't even raise their hand and volunteer. They're already up and going and doing it. A true 5%er. Now, you can be tall and not be an NBA basketball player, but you're not likely to be an NBA basketball player unless you're tall, right? Get my point?
Right.
So that's the principle of understanding why it's important to focus on a 5%er. 5%ers, by the principle, are 5% of the human race. Now, let me show you this graph real quick. This represents all humanity. We have 5%, a 15% category, a 30% category, and a 50% category. Break this out into 80%, 20%. I believe that when you're born, you're either born in this category or you're born in this category when it comes to choices. This is all about choices. Isn't that what life's about? When it's all said and done, isn't that what life's about? Isn't that what the Bible's about? In one word, it's about choice. You choose to believe or you choose not to believe.
Right.
That's what the whole entire book's about. #1 best-selling book ever in the history of the world. It's important to understand what it really was about. So when we look at Focus on the Five, the question is, God did not create all people the same for a reason. He didn't create all animals the same. All living things have different levels to their ability to make choices. Just like we have different levels to our ability to be athletic. We have different levels to our ability to be intellectual. We have different abilities to our ability to be able to be whatever.
Right.
Okay? This is about choices. The subject's about choices. So when kids are born, a bunch of kids on the playground. We'll say there's 20 kids on the playground playing. And 2 of those kids stop and look at each other and say, see that telephone pole over there? See the wire coming off the telephone pole? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? And the other kid goes, yeah. And so the one kid turns to the other 18 and says, you know what we're thinking? You know what we're about to do? And the one kid turns back around and the other kid's gone. Guess where he's at?
Climbing the pole.
He's up the pole already. See, that kid is a 5%er. That kid doesn't need to ask someone's permission to do it. He doesn't need to ask mom or dad. He doesn't need to ask one of his buddies. Doesn't need to analyze it. Doesn't need to think about it. He's already made a decision. Pole, wire, I can do it.
He's at the light pole.
He's already up it. Now what's interesting about that is both of those kids are 5%ers. Both born in that 20% category. But there's a difference between the 2 of them. You know what the difference is? Let me tell you. This kid here fits in this category of the 20%ers. He's the one up the pole already. The reason why he's up the pole already is because he has an influencer in his life, whether it's a grandpa, a mother, a father, a brother, somebody who's a major influencer in his life who's give him permission or her permission to be the person they were born to be. Understand what I'm saying?
Right.
What are the odds? What are the odds? Let's just look at odds. What are the odds of that person having a parent that thought it's also in this category? Think about that. We know what the odds are. We see it right here. Odds are not going to happen.
Right.
But what's interesting is the biggest influencer in society today is the 5%er. It's the one who says, I know I was born to be a leader. Can't help it. It wasn't an ego thing. Just, I mean, is it an ego thing to be born tall? Is it an ego thing to be born white? I guess it can be. But most of the world's not white. So that's something we learned. It's not something that we were born with.
Right.
So here's my point. That if I'm born one of these kids, and I think, and I was in my DNA to be a risk taker, to make decisions, to make choices, but I'm raised by a parent, two parents that are in this category, probably I'm going to be influenced to become a 15%er. That means that I'm going to have to stop and think about it. I'm going to have to be the kid that goes, let me tell you what we're about to do here, guys, just in case you didn't know. You know why that kid's doing that? Because they need feedback. They have an insecurity that's within them, a gene. It's an insecurity that says, even though I was born DNA, a 5%er, a risk taker, I have this gene that makes me insecure.
Right.
I need to be loved. I need to be accepted. All 5%ers are born with that heavy-sided gene. My theory is that 5%ers need to be loved more than this group. This group needs to be loved far greater than it's not even explainable. They need to be loved so deeply. And they're willing to love very deeply, interestingly enough. But it's just how God made us. So here's my point. So I'm going to remain a 5%er in my life if it's okay to be a 5%er. Give an example. If I'm born tall and my parents are 5 foot and I'm 10 foot, or 7 foot, probably a better analogy. If I'm born 7 foot and my parents are 5 foot, who's the freak in the family? I am. And you know what my mom and dad is going to raise me to say? Because they love me, care about me. They're going to raise me to say, son, try not to be so tall. Try not to stand so tall. Shrug your shoulders down a little bit and duck through those door spaces, because every time you hit your head, you look stupid. And you just don't fit in. And you're not going to fit in, and I'm worried about you. I want you to fit in. You're my son. And see, I know how to raise you to be a short person, because I understand what it is to be a short person. I believe that's the way you're supposed to live life. So I'm going to try to raise you to be a short person. I'm not going to embrace the fact that you're tall. Even though I may give words to it, I don't live by it. My actions will speak louder than my words. So I believe it's what's happening in society today. Statistically, it's human nature. We have a tendency to teach what we believe. We have a tendency to teach what we know. So this kid who is born a 5%er or a risk taker, raised by conservatives. See, there's a line right here that exists in society. And no one crosses that line. If you're born on this side of the line, you'll always be on that side of the line. If you're born on this side of the line, you'll always be on that side of the line. There's no crossing that line. Can't do it. If you're born tall, can you ever become short? If you're born short, can you ever become tall?
No.
No. If you're born black, can you ever become white?
Nope.
Yeah, it's a DNA thing. It's the same with being a 5%er. If you're born in this 20% group, you'll never be in that 80% group. Don't matter how you, let me tell you what happens when you put a square peg in a round hole. It hurts. So when this parent tries to raise this child to be like them, it screws with their head. It messes them up. It makes them really confused. They don't understand. Why do I have to shrug my shoulders, Mom and Dad? Why do I have to not be who I am? Why do I not have to be what I was born to be? Why can't I just be me? That was the compassion that made me want to write the book. That part right there got me, because I related to it. I got it. I was that guy. But here was the gift that I was given. I had two 5%ers in my life. They were the two biggest influencers in my life that told me it was good to be 5%. They wanted me to be a 5%er. They encouraged me to be a 5%er. Hell, I didn't have to stop and explain to those people about the telephone pole. I was the guy that was at the top of the pole, throwing my sweatshirt over the top of the wire and sliding down it. Did I get hurt at the bottom? Probably. But that's okay. The thrill was far worth it. The sprained ankle or the broken arm. I learned from it, though. See, that was the thing. I learned from it. And as soon as I got better, I went back up the pole again. This time, I figured out how to slow down the fall. Still did it. But I did it a little smarter. See, that is the nature of a 5%er. The world without 5%ers, there would be no world. Sheep without a leader would be lost sheep. They would not find food. They would die. And that's the principle of the 5%er. You know, most people in the world don't want to be a 5%er. Don't get them, don't understand them. Most of them, you know what's funny? They look up to them. They pay attention to them, but they just don't get them. They can fall in love with them even, but they fall out of love with them because they're thinking, you know what, you don't fit into the life I want to fit into. So it's very tough on the 5%er. There's a lot of problems that go with it. All right, so back to this. So to be a 15%er, I fall into this category, we'll call it fall into it because it's not true to the 5%er anymore. I become this category because I'm so influenced by 80% of the population that lives. It's their world. Just so you know, it's their world. They have 80% of it. So I live in the short person's world if I'm born tall. And I need to learn to live with that. I got to adjust to it somehow. But somehow too, I have to be true to who I was born to be. I got to find that balance, right? So that's what Focus on the 5 is about. Focus on the 5 is giving a soft place for that 5%er to fall. So here's what I believe. There's a little boy being born right now in China. You think China's going to let him be the 5%er he was born to be? No way. You know why? Because they're all short over there, figuratively speaking. But you get my point. The point is this, that what if that 5%er was raised? Well, better than that, what if there was a land that existed that 5%er could go to and become the 5%er he was supposed to be, he was born to be? Well, there is one. It's called America. America was founded on the principle of 5%ers. It was founded by 5%ers. The Constitution of the United States was written by 55 5%ers. Interesting, 55 5%ers. And those 5%ers were smart enough to know that if we write a constitution that protects the 5%er and raises up the 5%er, they'll come from all over the world here, no matter what. If they got to climb walls being shot at, they'll leave their family behind to get to that place, to be who they're supposed to be. Will it break their hearts? Sure it will. Will it make them tough? Sure it will. But you want to know what makes America America? It's the 5%er. We are the melting pot of the 5%ers from all over the world. Are you more likely to become a 5%er if both your parents are 5%ers? Have no clue. I don't pretend to know the answer to that. But I do know they exist. And I do know I can spot one from across the room. Let me tell you what, if a guy's using a flip phone, probably not a 5%er. Because by their nature, they love shiny objects. They can't resist. If there's a shiny object in the room, they've got to go find out what it is. They can't leave the room until they find out what it is. They can't help themselves. You just got to do it. If I held up a box in a room of 1,000 people and said, I've got the latest, greatest invention ever invented in this box, and I sat down and started eating my lunch, there would not be a 5%er leave the room without coming over and asking me what's inside that freaking box. They would have to know. And you know what? They would interrupt my lunch to do it and wouldn't even think a thing of it. And all 5%ers will smile at hearing that because they know who they are. They are tall. They've hit their head on the doorknob, the door facing a number of times. They know what it feels like. They absolutely know what I'm talking about. So that's all I'm speaking to is the 5%ers. Oh, well, except one exception. There is the parent who tries to raise the 5%er and doesn't know what to do with them. They need to understand, focus on the 5 as well. Because you need to know how to raise that kind of a child to be all of they can be. You want to know what a 5%er is? Go to any library and read a book. It's full of 5%ers. Columbus discovered America, 5%er. All the men signed the Constitution of the United States, all 5%ers. Show me a star athlete, 5%er. Show me a star football player, any star football player. I will show you the 5%er of his high school. You know how I know that? Because they say, let's take a tackle as an example. So you have a tackle. He gets tackled in a play. And he gets back up, and he gets tackled again all in the same play in high school. And he gets to college. And so he gets tackled in a play, and he gets back up, and he gets tackled in a play, and he gets back up again and makes the tackle. That's a 5%er. That's their nature. They can't help themselves. They don't give up, even if they get knocked down. You know what they think? The only thing separating me from being successful is my ability to get back up again fast enough to go do it again. Do you think he gets a little smarter each time he gets tackled? Well, sure he does. Because he's willing to take the risk, take the try. He's willing to take the bumps and the abrasions to become smarter. Now, is there 5%ers that are born that are not true to their DNA? Yes. Because they get put doubt in their minds from this group down here. And there's another factor. It's called motivation. What motivates human beings? Well, it's different for different people. It's a whole other subject. But you have to have motivation to be a star, tall basketball player. Otherwise, you're just a tall guy. Get my point?
I do.
You can be born that way. It doesn't mean you're automatically going to be successful. It doesn't work that way. Got to have motivation. And motivation comes from a combination of things. Now, has there been 5%ers successful that was not surrounded by people that supported them? Yes. Because they just, through whatever, have just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to be who I was born to be. I'm going to be true to who I was born to be. I'm tall by God, and I'm going to be the best that I can be. That doesn't happen very often. And I'm not here to tell you the science of that. This is about choices. It's about the choices that we've made in life and what is the pattern of the people that make choices. Okay, so with this here said, I want to show you something else. So of the people that are born in these categories, these 5%ers right here, we're going to draw another pyramid out here of just 5%ers. Of that group of people that exist, 5% of them actually are focused and become true to who they were born to be. They're motivated to be all they can be. And you can take it to the bank. They're also intellectual. Always. Always, always, always. And I'm not talking about educated. They're just intellectual by their nature. They're intellectual and they're self-starters. Again, I'm not here to tell you what creates a self-starter. I'm here to tell you to be able to understand who you are and what makes you be able to move forward in life and make choices. So this breaks down the same way. In this group, you fall somewhere in the food chain. But this group here ends up having, which is just a percentage of this group here, I don't know what it is, 0.25, I think, of the total amount. So let's take this category, the 15% category. Same thing happens. Same principle. There's a group that's 5% that are true to who they are. Yeah, they've been influenced by this group down here, and yes, they were born in their DNA, but still, even though they've taken all that in and said, okay, but even with that said, I'm going to push forward, I'm going to use my perseverance, and I'm going to become all that I'm capable of being. Even though I make choices the way that I do, I'm going to embrace who I am. Does that make sense? So that group there, I think, comes out to 0.75. This group right here, the 30%ers, I love the 30%ers. All CEOs come from this category. Founders of companies all come from this category. You know why? Because they were willing to take the risk. They were willing to be the first one to start a company. They were the ones that says, I'm willing to roll the dice. But the CEO is waiting for this guy here to create the idea because he wants to show him how to do it better. Because he's a detail person. He's an operations person, or she. It is their nature to question everything. Because remember what category they're built in? They're born into this category down here. So this category here is the conservative mind. This is the mind down here that says, well, we need to stop and think about that before we make a decision. This applies completely to marketing, by the way, 1,000%, because it's human nature. It's how we make choices. Isn't that what marketing is? Entirely. It's about how we make choices. How do we choose to buy this item or that item? Well, let me tell you how people buy. The habits of the way people buy, 1,000% of the people on the face of the earth do not make a decision until this group up here tries it. Let me say that again. Doesn't matter if it's the Tesla, doesn't matter if it's a new candy bar, doesn't matter if it's a new way of singing a song. All things that exist on the face of the earth first were tried by the kid that went up the telephone pole. Had to. Someone had to do it. But God in his wisdom knew that he had to make a certain percentage of the people to be that risk taker. But he didn't want them all to be, because the world would be really screwed up if that was the case. It'd be too many. It would be very imbalanced. All the sheep don't need to be leaders. They just need one out of ever so many. Make sense? So in the 30% category, we'll call it the CEO category. Well, not everybody in this category is a CEO, but let me tell you who is. The top 5% of their category. They become the CEOs that run these companies. Because who do you want watching after your money if you invent something new? The risk taker? Or the guy who's conservative and says, no, let's think about this before we spend the money? Well, of course that's who you're going to have running. The Bill Gates of the world, I guarantee you, their CEOs, conservative. Show me a non-for-profit organization, let me tell you who runs it. Conservative. Not a risk taker. Risk takers weren't born to do that. It's not their task, it's not their job. Their job is to be the ones that say, let's do it. Let's stop talking about it. While they're all still around the table talking about it, the 5%ers just got up and they go, what happened to Bill? I don't know, he just left. Well, because Bill didn't want to hear it talked about anymore. He's already figured out it's a telephone pole with a wire down it. Can't wait to go down it. He's out there doing it. And guess what? He's been down it 10 times before they all even get up from the table. And now they all think they're experts on it, but guess who's really the expert? The guy that went out there and went down the pole 10 times. That's who the expert is. That's who the leader is. That's what makes this world move forward. And to understand that philosophy, to understand that principle, means that if we can identify that group of people, we can actually make an enormous change to the world. We could solve problems faster. We could actually give the emphasis to the people that really, it would even change how loans were made. If you could identify that DNA group. Right? So, 50%ers, they're a really interesting group. That's the ultimate conservative. They're true to who they are. I love them. Without them, there'd be no need for this guy. This is half of the world. Half of the world is ultra-conservative and damn proud of it. And they should be. I'm not so sure they don't live a happier life. Because they're happy with whatever. As long as this guy up here tells them what to do. Just saying. Now, it's not a popular idea with people that are non-5%ers. They don't want to hear what I'm saying. But this is not about them. It's not to them. This is to focus on the 5. Because they need to know that's who they are and that's who they were born to be. And they need to rise up and be who they're meant to be. And they need to work together. Because they need each other worse than anybody else. Because they've gone through life thinking they're weird, thinking they're strange, thinking that they don't belong, they don't fit. Yet there's this thing in them at the same time that says, wait a minute, I'm Superman. I can do anything. I've got this something that my friends didn't have. I naturally led them, anything I ever did. I could think faster, I had more common sense. I just, comes easy for me. Creative. And everybody's like, well, you're weird though. You are weird and you don't fit in. You're going to lose and you're going to be without and you're going to struggle. Just like they told Jesus Christ, who died on the cross. But before he did, he found 12 followers that were from all different walks of life. One was a fisherman. They come from all different kinds, but they were 5%ers. They all believed that they could be a part of something bigger than themselves. They all believed that they were born to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And the most famous book that's ever existed talks about all 13 of them and how they became the 5%ers they were meant to be. The Bible's not about anything but 5%ers. Not really. Not in my book. Not in my interpretation of it. But I am this guy right here that wrote the book. It's the 50%er. Who is the 50%er? It's your managers. That's who manages restaurants that somebody else designed and created. It's not their task to be creative and think of Do they have some creative abilities? Yes. Let me tell you what group it is. Within this group of people right here, there's some 5%ers. And that group right there is the ones who head up non-for-profit organizations. That group right there is the ones that manage your restaurants. And they're great managers because they're conservative. They think about money first. They think about people. It's not about their pay. They're willing to work for less money and work their butts off and use all their talents. They're also very smart. That's why they're in this top group. But they're still conservative. Set everything aside. They were born conservative. They're going to be conservative to the day they die. And they save every penny they've ever made. And the banks love them. Banks wouldn't exist without this group right here. Make sense? So the 30%er is just the upper group of this when it comes to making choices. The 30%er is a 30%er because of why? Because a 5%er was their influence in their life. The 5%er said, you gotta think for yourself, son. You gotta get outside that box. And this 50%er or the 80%er is going, what box? What box? Get outside the box. No, I gotta stay in the box because that's where the rules are. See, we wrote the rules because we're the majority. We voted them in this country. Get into politics. I believe in what's politically correct because that's, of course, I'm conservative minded. This group up here, it's your risk takers, but they're not always true to who they are. Keep that in mind. And so there is 4 categories. The second book that's coming out is about the breakdown of this group. Focus on the 5 book is really about this group up here entirely because I want to start out to focus on that group of people because all of these 5%ers in each of these categories come because of this 5%er that exists. If this 5%er didn't exist, this group would never discover who they are. They had to be influenced by a 5%er in their life. And let me tell you how this works out. The percentages, 5% of this category, 5% of this category, 5% of this category, and 5% of this category ends up being 5% of the human race. That's why I say it's important to focus on the 5. It's not this 5%. It's the 5% of all these categories combined. That is who your movers and shakers are. That's what makes this world really move forward. But you got to understand what a 5%er looks like, walks like, talks like, smells like, what they eat. You know what they eat? They're the first ones that go to our new restaurant in town. They're the very first ones that walk in the door. So if you're marketing a new restaurant, who are you marketing to? 5%er. There's nobody else going to come to your restaurant initially. But guess what? The average 5%er has over 500 followers. The average true 5%er has 500 followers in their life that listen to everything they do. If they say, well, I'm telling you what, that new Cheddar's restaurant's really good, Cheddar's will make it. If the majority of 5%ers that go in there feel that way. Because there's 500 people listening to them, either through social media, through friendship, through word of mouth, which is still the strongest marketing on the face of the earth. When a 5%er speaks, let me tell you what, 500 people listen on the average. That's enormous influence. So if you're spending marketing dollars, where should you focus your dollars at? Especially if it's a new idea. Well, I'd suggest 1,000% at 5%ers. So how do you identify 5%ers? What if